new teeth in one day might sound a little bit strange, might sound a little bit crazy, but it's actually something that we can now achieve. It's not magic. It's purely down to engineering. And what we look at when we're doing this is using multiple implants. And what they do is they share that load, a little bit like legs on a table. Typically, the implant surgeon will use 4 to 6 implants. And what they do with the ones at the back is they often tilt them. And they tilt them sort of between 15, 30, sometimes 45 degrees. And what this allows the surgeons to do is to dodge or avoid things like the sinuses in the upper jaw, which is like an airspace, like a balloon. And in the lower jaw, there's some nerves, and they want to avoid those. So they're able to tilt these implants rather than put them in straight, which was the conventional way of doing things. What this does for the surgeons is it widens the platform and it allows more teeth to be placed, creates more stability, and then functionally less leverage. So often what the surgeons do when they're placing the implants is they'll check something called primary stability. And this is effectively how solid that implant goes in. And there are various methods to do this, but usually if they're doing it by hand, there's a little wrench that they use, tiny little wrench for teeth, and that can measure something called torque or the turning force. Or if they're doing it using the little machine, that'll give them a little number. So there's a number involved. And they're often aiming for something equal or greater to what we call 35 Newton centimeters, which is that sort of turning force or the stability that implant goes into that bone. And they also might measure something called the ISQ. And this is the resonance. So effectively, it's kind of measuring how solid that implant is by passing a little, if you like, simply put, a little magnetic wave. So a little peg goes into the implant. This little wave resonates that peg and literally gives a little sort of feedback to the measuring device, it's a tiny little device. And you're looking at sort of around about 60 or 70 plus and in that range. And if those numbers are good, then that's a green light for going for these, what we call these immediate teeth and loading those implants. So what happens on day one, any poorly teeth come out, the implants go in, and then you get your fixed provisional bridge. That's the bridge that can't be removed. It's a provisional bridge because it's going to be changed. And the materials that surgeons often use are sometimes acrylic, sometimes something called PMMA, which is a very solid, robust material. And it's screwed onto these things called multi-unit abutments. So the abutment is something that goes into the implant. And these abutments can correct those angles. So remember, we put those implants in at angles, we put these abutments on top, and then everything becomes straight. So the screws go in fairly straight. And it's cross arch. So what happens there is that all the implants are linked together. So each implant supports the other implant. By the fascinating thing, by doing that cross arch splinting, that keeps this little thing called micro movements tiny. So, less than 100 microns. So when we put the implant in, what we don't want any movement. So when the implant's put in, what you want is stability on the implant. You want the implant essentially to be left alone. And then what happens is that the bone cells will knit nicely around that implant. But if that implant is moving around, then the bone cells don't like it. So they don't knit around the implant. So we want the implant to be nice and stable. And by linking all those implants together, we're reducing those little tiny movements. And that allows those bone cells to knit onto the surface. And we get that osseointegration. And that osseointegration is occurring while you're able to smile, speak, and eat the food that you like. There's a lot of planning that goes on behind this. So the planning is usually all digital. It's usually a 3D CBCT scan, which is like a very detailed X-ray in 3 dimensions, showing the 3 dimensions of the bone. It shows the surgeons where the anatomy is, so they can see where the sinus is. They can see how thick the bone is, so the bone volume that they have. And they can essentially see where the nerves lie as well. So often they'll do a printed guide, and these printed guides will sort of help where the implants are going to be positioned. And they kind of represent where the teeth are going to be. So always implantologists will work backwards. They'll know where the teeth are going to be, and then they'll plan the implants in the best position so that when the teeth come, they fit on the implants. And it's all sort of designed around sort of vectors, force, distances, and it's all mapped. And this is way before anybody picks up that drill and starts the surgery. So all this planning has gone on in the background. All the design with the technicians is all done before anything is undertaken in terms of putting an implant in place. Unfortunately, it's not for everybody. So there are some red flags, maybe soft or thin bone. So that bone may need to be rebuilt before the implants can be placed. It might be that you're a heavy bruxer, so you clench. So that might just go against having this type of surgery. So it might be staged. There might be some systemic issues like diabetes that could be uncontrolled, heavy smoking maybe, active gum infection. So you want the gum infection to be sort of stabilized as best as possible. So sometimes the treatment is staged. So rather than having the teeth in a day, it doesn't mean that you can't have implants. It just means that the treatment might be staged. So in other words, the implants will be placed first, then there'll be a period of letting the bone knit around those implants before they're loaded. So you don't have the teeth in a day, but you have the teeth a little bit later on. When we talk about teeth in a day, the first set that you get, they're called provisionals. And that means that there's a second stage. And the final bridge is often a zirconia bridge, sometimes metal ceramic. And it could be sometimes like 3-6 months after the bone is settled and those implants are fully integrated and the soft tissue is all healed. And then we start to progress. And then the surgeon will start to progress to the next stage. Early on, nice soft diet, keep good oral hygiene. And it's all about maths. It's not magic.